Mustas.
Okay, Tov, Erev Shabbat, Parshat Vayikra, March 20th, and today is Bet Nisan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I just want to remind you the home front commands guidelines are still in effect, and therefore we'll be conducting two minyanim tomorrow morning, one at 7:15 and one at 8:45. The rest of the Shabbat schedule is as usual. And with that, we can begin.
Okay. We ended the last year discussing the Hagaddah prior to the four questions, the Fir Kashas, the Arba Sheilot, or however you refer to them. When I was a child, and it's still true today, we asked the Kushiot both in Hebrew and Yiddish, and I still lead everyone in saying them in Yiddish. I guess it's the power of tradition. I had a lesson a couple of years ago in tradition. Deborah sent me to Osherad because one of her sisters told her that there were bones for Zeroah. You know, when you set up the kara, so one of the things that you have to put on is a bone for Zeroah. And she said she had been to Osherad and they had special bones and they were selling them as Zeroah. I get there and acquire where to find the Zeroah bones. And I'm directed to a frozen bin containing bones which are labeled Zeroah. The only problem was that I look at them and I read the wrapper. They were lamb, and they were lamb shanks. And in our family, we had the minhag not to use lamb products at the Seder, since we can no longer bring the Korban Pesach. And we don't want anybody to believe that we had anything to do with something that could be construed as having been part of or related somehow to the Korban Pesach. So we never used anything that was lamb. Some of my kids always complain that because I come from a Litvish background, we don't have enough minhagim. And the ones that we do observe are observed by not doing something as opposed to by doing something. Well, on the topic of minhagim, one of our customs in our family is that on the evening of Seder, if they had gefilte fish in the menu, we never ate red horseradish, only white, so that no one would think that somehow makat dam applied to us. So much for the family memorabilia. Back to the Arba Kushyo. So the Mishnah in Pesachim on Daf Kuf Tez Zayin says the following: Mozgo lo kosheni v'chan ben shoel aviv. And here the child asks his father, Imein das ben aviv melamdo. The child is not able to or is too young, then his father teaches him. Manish tana alayla zemiko alaylot. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים חמץ ומצה, הלילה הזה כולו מצה. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים שאר ירקות, הלילה הזה מרור. שבכל הלילות אנו אוכלים בשר צלי שלוק ומבושל, הלילה הזה כולו צלי. שבכל הלילות אנו מפילים פעם אחת, הלילה הזה שתי פעמים. So you'll notice that question 3 posed by the Mishnah is not a question that we asked today. And what does it mean? It means that on all other nights we eat meat that is roasted, that is cooked, that is boiled, that is cooked. And tonight we only eat roasted meat. Okay? So at some point, the first thing I think you should note is that Manish Tana, why is this night different than all other nights, is not one of the questions. It is rather the introduction to the question. Also note that what is our fourth question about Mesubim is not mentioned in the Mishnah, right? What do we say? And Shukhalayos anu Yoshvim bein Mesubim uvein. I'm blanking. Anu Oakland bein Mesubim. Right? right? That question does not appear, okay? Instead, we have the question about tzli, shaluk, and mevushal. So Rav Kahati, in his explanation of the Mishnah, says, "Shebecho those ono ochlim ben yoshvim ben mesubin halayla hazeh kulanu mesubin v'yesh sovrim shesheila zu nosfa b'makom she'ilat tzli she'efsiku l'sho oto me'acharei churban habayit." There are those who believe that this was a substitution made post the Churban because we don't have the Korban Pesach. Ve'ilu bizman habayit lo hayah kanireh makom l'shelat haseba. So for those who believe that it's an additional question, in other words, it didn't exist and now does exist, so what's their explanation for it? So they say there was no need to ask the question in the time of the prior to the Churban, because in any event, that is the way everybody ate, right? Those for Sheilat Sli, Shefsiku L'Shoto Me'achrei Churban V'ilu B'zman HaBayit, Lo Haya Kanireh Makom L'Sheilat HaSeba. There was no need to ask this question. Lefi Shedarkam Haya L'Hasev Kivnei Chorin, Gam B'chol Yemot HaShana. That was the way they ate. So there was no need to ask the question, why are we eating reclining? Because we always eat reclining. Okay. Apparently, the Rambam had 5 questions and not 4. The Rambam in Hilchos Chometz U'Matzah, Perek Het Halacha Bet, says this following. He starts with Marchi U'Mavorech Bori Pri HaGofen, and then he gets to V'chan HaBen Shoel. Here come the questions. V'Oma HaKorei, right? Now, interestingly, it was a dialogue. According to the Rambam, what do? Our children get up and they say, etc. What the Rambam is saying is that the one who's conducting the Seder, the Korei, says, what does he say? The Kana ben Shoel, the Omer HaKorei, the one who's conducting the Seder, says, poses the question, Manishtana halayla hazeh mikol halaylot. Explain to me, tell me why this night is different. And then they go on, Shebechol halaylot ein onu mapilim. He has a different order. Ein onu mapilim mafilu pamachaz, v'halayla hazeh shtei pamim. Shebechol halaylot onu oklim chametzu matzah, v'halayla hazeh kulo matzah. Shebechol halaylot onu oklim basar tzli shaluk u'mevushal, v'halayla hazeh kulo tzli. Shebechol halaylot onu oklim she'ar yirakot, v'halayla hazeh mirorim, not moro, mirorim. And then he has a 5th question. What's his 5th question? Shebechol halaylot onu oklim ben yoshvim ben mesubin, v'halayla hazeh kulanu mesubin. So mesubin was the question, was one of the questions, but he had 5 questions, and it was not a substituted question. After the Churban, the Rambam removed tzli as a question and was left with 4 questions. The Rambam publishes at the end of Hilchot Chometz U'Matzah, he has what he calls Nusach Hagaddah. And in Nusach Hagaddah, he says the following: Manishtan alayza mikol halos, shebechol halos ein onu mapilim afilu pamachas, shebechol onu achlim chametz u'matzah, shebechol halos onu achlim she'ari yarakos. In other words, he leaves out tzvi shaluk, etc. So, I mean, what's interesting is that in the text of the Mishnah Torah, he's telling you, or he's explaining to you, what was done at the time of the Mikdash. I mean, it's very interesting. The Rambam, the Rambam is they say is the ultimate rationalist, right? And he has interesting theories about what Yemos HaMashiach are going to look like, the Mashiach, etc. It's the ultimate rationalist. But he's the only major posek, medieval posek, who deals with the whole range of halacha, right? When the Shulchan Aruch comes along, you have Aruch Chaim, you have Choshen Mishpat, you have Evan Ha'ezer, and you have Choshen Mishpat Evan Ha'ezer, Orach Chaim, and why am I blanking? Anyway, you have four parts of Shulchan Aruch. The Mechaber does not deal whatsoever. Mechaber does not deal whatsoever with the Yemos HaMashiach, what's going to be in the future. The Rambam, on the other hand, deals with all the halachas. He has Hilchos Karbanos, he has Hilchos Beis HaMikdash, Klei HaMikdash, how you have to create them, etc., etc. And so here, when he's talking to you about what the halacha is, right, or what the halacha should be, he includes the question about Tzvi Shaluk, and he doesn't omit it. When he gets to the practical, what do we do on the night of the Seder, as long as there's still the Beis HaMikdash is a Chorban? So then he takes it out and tells you don't say that. Now, interestingly, also with regard to roasted meat, the Rambam has an interesting halacha, and he says the following: Makom shenagu lechot tzli b'leilei pesachim ochad. If the minhag of the makom or of your house was to eat broiled meat, you eat broiled meat. Makom shelo leachol ein ochlim zeir shemer yu basa pesachu. But there was another minhag, says the Rambam, not to eat it, because people would think or would say, "Oh, you're eating roasted meat. You're eating the korban pesach." And then he says, "U'b'v'ho makom also lechol setzli." In other words, he makes a distinction between beef and lamb and goats, right? B'chol makom also lechol setzolui. You can't eat a roasted lamb, kulo, an entire lamb. I've read it wrong. You can't eat it as a whole lamb. Because people will think it's the korban pesach, and you're eating it outside of the precincts of the Beis HaMikdash. But if you had a lamb and it was cut up, or you're eating everything but one part of it, Oshalak bo, or it was cooked, bo eva, behumachuba, hareza muta bechom makom mokta b'makom shenagu. So in other words, the Rambam does not preclude the eating of lamb on the first night. It's whatever the minhag is. The only thing that he precludes is a totally roasted whole lamb on the night of Pesach. When I got married, and one of the things you have to get used to when you get married, and one of the things that is sort of jolting, is all of a sudden you're invited to your in-laws' house. It happens on both sides. So, of course, the first year we were married, I go to my in-laws' house for Seder, and my in-laws only served boiled tongue and boiled chicken for Seder. So you would say, okay, they don't want to have sleeve, v'chulei, etc. Okay, but it was very jarring. I'll tell you why, because the Seder at my in-laws' house was a very formal event. The men wore tuxedos, and my mother-in-law wore a floor-length dress. Eating boiled food as the main course hardly seemed to go with the surroundings. In my family, we ate quote-unquote roasted meat, but we're always careful to add some water to the bottom of the roaster, because then the meat is not considered sliesh, right? So I guess Debbie never really loved the boiled tongue and the boiled chicken, because when we started making our own siddurim, she did it my way. Although I never instituted the tuxedo bit. But in any event, just moving on to something else, the Yerushalmi had three questions. One was Ein anu mapilim afilu pam achas, matzah, and tzli. Those were the three questions posed by the Yerushalmi. The order mentioned in the Mishnah seems different than our current order. So where does our current order emanate from? So the machzah or vitri, now this is Ashkenaz. Okay, I'm sure I forgot to ask my resident Teimani, but I'm sure the Teimanim asked the questions in the order that the Rambam asked them. Okay, but the Machzor Vitri in the 11th century, who was a Talmud of Rashi, lists the current order, which became the standard uh, text, at least in among the Ashkenazim. Now, we are told that we are to eat behaseba, meaning leaning left. As the Mishnah, as I just read you in Pesachim says, or the Mishnah says, Lo yochal achi yosef. Can't eat, not everything, right? We know that Mora is excluded from this, but when we partake of the mitzvahs, etc., we drink wine, we eat matzah, etc., we're supposed to lean to the left. Okay? Why? So there are various explanations offered. One is slaves eat standing, and to show physically that we are no longer slaves, we eat in a reclining methodology, a reclining way. And the Rambam says, now, you have to pay attention to the Rambam. Our nusach is chayiv adam liros es atzmo kilu hu yatzam mitzrayim. On this night, we internally have to see ourselves as having just left Mitzrayim. Rambam has a different girsa in his Hagaddah. He says, chayiv adam laharos es atzmo. In other words, klape chutz, to the outside world, the person has to do things to show that he just left Mitzrayim. How does he do that? What is one of the things that he does? So it says the Rambam, of course, chayiv adam laharos es atzmo ki'ilu hu ba'atzmo yatsa atar mishibud Mitzrayim. He just left Mitzrayim. Shenema v'otanu hotzi misham. V'arzet tziva hakadosh baruch hu b'Torah v'zacharta ke'eved hayita. You have to remember that you were a slave. Klomar, ki'ilu ator ba'atzmecha hayita eved. You have to see yourself as if you were a slave. V'yatzata lechered v'niftet, and you were taken out and redeemed. Lefichach, how do I show that? I show that when I eat. Kishesoed adam balayla hazeh tzarich lechol v'lishtot v'hu may save derech. He has to eat and drink and lean to the left in the fashion that a free person would do. So, what is the appropriate way to be Makayim Mesubin? So one reclines on a couch or some such thing with pillows. I told you already that my grandparents say to we would bring a small couch to the table for my grandfather. He would load it with pillows on which he reclined, and it was always a treat for us to get to sit next to him, sort of snuggle with him on the couch during the Seder. The seating should be set prior to the Seder. One reclines to the left when eating or drinking. Why? As I said, several reasons are given why we recline to the left. Not why we recline, but why is the reclining done to the left? So the first thing is, it's practical. Most people are righties and eat with their right hand and wouldn't be able to do so. If I leaned right, how could I eat? Right? I wouldn't be able to eat. So I lean left. Shouldn't that mean that if I'm a lefty, I should lean right because I eat with my left hand? So, but the minhag is that even a lefty leans to the left because there's a fear, Shema Yaktin Kona Lavesha. What does that mean? It was feared that if one leaned right, his windpipe and his esophagus would get mixed up and the eater could choke. So notwithstanding the fact that the eater may be a left-handed, we lean to the left because otherwise we're afraid that it might cause him to choke. And we recline when eating the foods associated with the Seder, wine, matzah, korech, but not when we eat maror. Why? Because maror is the zikaron that we were slaves, and slaves don't recline. So I mean, clearly there's a great deal of role playing at the Seder, and one of the main role playings is the chiyuv, or the obligation to recline. Now, interestingly, there's a machloket among the Rishonim as to whether the halacha of haseba, of reclining, still applies. So you'll ask, why wouldn't it? So the Ravian and the Raviyar, who were French Balei Tosod and Rishonim, explained that at the time of the Mishnah, Klal Yisrael ate reclining. As a general problem, free people ate reclining, right? We said at the very beginning that the Seder is sort of a copy of a Greco-Roman feast. And that's how the Greeks and Romans ate. They ate reclining at the time of the Mishnah. But currently, they're saying, when we are extant in the Middle Ages, when free people do not eat when reclining. So there is no point to reclining, because I don't show anything. Nobody knows that free people recline, because free people don't recline. If one thinks about it, what is the basis for the argument? What propels the Ravan and the Raviyar to say eat without reclining? And what propels or compels the other Rishonim to say, no, we do it mesubin? According to those who say we should eat reclining, we are saying that the best way to recreate the time experience is by mimicking and copying what was done. But according to the Raviyah and Ravan, the obligation and there's a great deal of logic to what they say, because what is the person supposed to do on the night of the Seder? Chayiv Adam Liros es Atzmo Ki'ilu Hu Yotza Mitzrayim, or even according to the Rambam, Chayiv Adam Laharos es Atzmo. He either has to see himself or he has to show himself. So if I adapt a custom, I mean, I understand what they're saying. If I adapt a custom that's no longer extant, right? People don't eat reclining. So what am I showing? I'm not showing anything. I'm not seeing myself as free. I'm just mimicking something that happened thousands of years ago. But says Ravian and Rav, I'm free now. Why am I free? Right? Why am I free? I'm free because of Yetzias Mitzrayim. In other words, the moment that I am in as a free person is only because of Yetzias Mitzrayim. So I have to act like a free person does today. Whereas the others say, no, we are showing what our forefathers did, and we fit into that chain on Seder night. It's an interesting machlokas. I think philosophically it's an interesting machlokas. But anyway, there are various ways to look at it. I don't know anybody who doesn't recline, by the way, because we don't paskin like the Ravan or the Raviyar, but clearly there were people who did. I came across a shiur which was given and published by Rabbi Bary Eisenberg, which is interesting, and it may have some practical effect for some people. And Rabbi Leibowitz is a Rosh Yeshiva in YU, in Yeshiva University. He's also the head of REITs, I think, or the head of the Smicha program, I don't know which. And he says the following, he poses the following question, or he tells the following story, I should say. He says that apparently Rabbi Maurice Lamb, who is Rabbi Norman Lamb's brother, at some point davened in his shul, which is, I believe, in North Woodmere, in the Five Towns. And he wasn't feeling well. Rabbi Lamb was not feeling well around Pesach. And he was having digestive issues. And he said he was clear. It was clear to him. We'll get to this maybe later, that he would not be able to eat a shear of the matzah that we eat, to be yotzei the mitzvah of matzah. And he said he wanted to know if Rabbi Leibowitz had any suggestions to him about what he could do so that he would be able to eat a shear of matzah. Now, this is a question that comes up, not so much at the Seder, with regard to egg matzahs. What are egg matzahs? Egg matzahs are flour and some sort of fruit juice, apple juice, grape juice, whatever it is, that are mixed together. And the Gemara says that mei peiros are not mechametz, right? However, the question is it really matzah? So generally we say that not everybody agrees at the Seder, but post the Seder, older people who can't digest matzah can eat egg matzahs. But he didn't want to tell them to eat egg matzahs. So now I'm going to tell you another story that I once heard because it's relevant to this. Rav Moshe Feinstein's son-in-law, who was my Rebbe, was Rabbi Dr. Moses Tendler, Moshe Tendler. Rabbi Tendler has a son-in-law who lives here in Eretz Yisrael, whose name is Rabbi Dr. Shabtai Rappaport. He's a big Talmid Chacham. He had a yeshiva for a while, and then for a number of years, I don't think it's still so, he was the head of the Beis Medrash program in Bar Ilan University. Anyway, apparently Rav Shabtai Rappaport has the minhag that you're going to hear about now, to eat what I would call its teimani matzos. What are teimani matzos? Teimani matzos look like lafa. Okay, if you buy either shawarma or falafel in a lafa, that's what teimani matzos look like. They're very careful. They don't allow them to rise more than 18 minutes, v'chulei, but they don't have the heart attack like we have. So that's Rav Shabtai Rappaport's minhag. So I hear the story is told that when he first married Rav Tendler's daughter, he goes to Monsey for Yontif, and he brings along his teimani matzos. And he comes to the table, and he puts his teimani matzos on the table in front of him for his 3 matzos for the kahara. Rabbi Tendler takes one look at it, and he says, "Get that chametz off of my table." But you should know that that's what Teimanim and certain Sephardim eat. They eat what is the equivalent of lafa. So Rabbi Leibowitz that says to him, perhaps you could find, and I'm sure they exist in America, Sephardic soft matzahs in lieu of the what is Ashkenazic matzah, which you've always eaten, and it would be easier for you to digest. He reports that Rabbi Maurice Lamb was initially uncomfortable with the suggestion. And he says that would be an understatement. Because, as I've told you, I remember things from the time I was a kid and what the minhag is. It's just not our minhag to eat that kind of matzah, right? I mean, some people think if you eat anything but hardtack hand shmura, it's not matzah. But I mean, certainly this, or we're not going to get into this, but the whole business about gebrux. Some people think that gebrux is worse than chometz. It's just what you grew up with. So Rabbi Maurice Lamb is having a hard time with it. All right, we'll stop it. We'll continue because it's interesting. It's interesting how different poskim relate to sort of the change of minhagim. That's what I found most fascinating about it. And we'll pick it up next time, please God, on Monday. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Otherwise, everybody should have a peaceful and quiet Shabbos, and Jay will give you the schedule, which is going to stay like it's been for the last couple of weeks.
So tonight we'll bench licht at 5:15. Mincha and Kabbalat Shabbat is at 5:40. And tomorrow morning we'll daven at 7:15 and 8:45. Wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom.
If questions, if not, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat
I think Deborah has a
Shalom
question.
B'Shakate.
Oh, no, I guess not. Okay.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.